This is our good news this morning.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. I was making my way Thursday morning this week to our church, King of Life. And even though it was raining and the visibility was not great, I was still driving a little bit faster than the speed limit, as I usually do, but also as safely as possible, on alert and leaving enough space between cars on the road to account for any need to drive defensively. And this particular morning, I was driving on Highway 7, driving in the left lane and passing traffic on the right lane, and driving about 10 kilometers over the speed limit, but leaving a couple of car lengths in front of me as there was a traffic light that wasn't too far ahead. I wanted enough time to stop without needing to slam on the brakes. And then another car drove up quite quickly behind me and was remaining dangerously close behind my car, and then proceeded to flash bright lights as an aggressive signal to get me to either speed up or to move over to the slower lane. Did that happen to you ever before? Mm-hmm. So I saw that the right lane had loads of slower cars behind me, not any space, so I knew it wasn't a good option to change lanes. And I wasn't interested in driving recklessly fast in the pouring rain, just to catch up to the car that was a couple of car lengths in front of me and then halt at the light right up ahead. So I did what any driver would normally do when faced with this situation. I slowed down just a little bit to show that the driver behind me wasn't the boss of me, and I was not going to be persuaded by this foolish behavior. And of course, the driver did what any other driver would normally do when faced with this situation. The driver found a hole in the traffic in the right-hand lane, zoomed past me, all the while I was resuming my normal speed, and then returned to the lane right in front of me, and then slowed down to show me who was really boss. And of course, the traffic, as I had anticipated, slowed down even more as we approached the set of lights, and we were going even slower than we were before this foolish interlude. And so I muttered out loud, "Seriously, buddy?" as I slammed on my brakes to avoid running into this car. Really, I muttered something else that isn't too appropriate to say on a Sunday morning from the pulpit. So I also flashed my brights, just to let the foolish driver know what I really thought of this idiotic charade. And I fumed for a few minutes, frustrated at how stupid and how dangerous and how foolish this driver was. What a fool, I thought. Yet knowing I also played my part in all of this, I then proceeded to coach myself to chill out as I was heading into the church office and didn't need to bring a bad attitude with me. And I also had this Sunday's gospel in my mind, and something within me knew that this was going to be a teaching moment for me. And then something unexpected happened. We both ended up needing to turn left at Barnett Highway, the upcoming intersection, and we had 2 left-turning lanes. And I wanted to get a good look at this person who was driving a little bit recklessly and foolishly and just engaged in this power struggle with me, and see that person face to face. And usually when I'm in these kind of situations, I resemble a little bit more of a New York cabbie with a whole set of hand gestures to communicate exactly how I feel about the foolish drivers I'm judging. But this time, I decided I could manage myself a little bit better than that. My daughter would be so proud. And so as our cars were side by side and were waiting for this green light, we looked over at each other, and then I proceeded to wave to the man, trying my best to make a peace offering after a little battle. And baffled, looking like he was trying to figure out if he knew who I was, and he waved back and looked a little bit bewildered. And as the light turned green, we drove off, and he drove a lot slower than before, and actually gave me space to enter into the lane in front of him. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment." But I say to you, if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to counsel. And if you say, "You fool," you will be liable to the hellfire. it's easy to forget the expectations that God has for us in our relationships, especially when we are removed enough from seeing each other face to face and from knowing one another heart to heart, and we dehumanize people and quickly judge others to be fools. We can easily set up our camps, make villains of one another, use our power to protest against each other's actions, be it with placards and posters and picket lines and political camps, or with newscasters and journalists and government ministers and judges. The hard part when we are certain of our righteousness and we are certain of the foolishness of others is that somewhere in between we lose sight of the truth. Somewhere in between we get lost in our anger and we forget to see each other face to face and heart to heart. We forget that our opponent is just as human as we are and that God doesn't actually pick sides. God doesn't pick sides. God's just as much on the side of the self-righteous as God is on the side of the fool, however we see it. And I think this is something that we have lost sight of, especially in our own country with the controversy over the pipelines. And I'm not here to pick sides or to tell you how to think about these issues. You've got your own minds. But I'm just here to point out there are real human beings on both sides. And when we remember this, it is easier to enter into a real dialogue, face to face and heart to heart, and to come to terms with one another and make peace. It is easier to find a common purpose and growth that comes from working together and entrusting the outcome to God. A common purpose that comes from choosing life and trusting there is enough life for everyone to go around. For when our hearts are turned towards God and are turned towards the hearts of others, we can hear the heartbeat of God within us all, aching for us to choose life each and every day. And Jesus has a lot to say about hearing the heartbeat of God within the hearts of others and choosing life in our relationships. A close reading of Matthew's Gospel reveals how Jesus is propped up in comparison to Moses to see the role that the law has in the life of the community. On a mountaintop, Moses received the 10 Commandments to share with God's people, 10 ways of living that revealed how to choose life in right relationships with God, with others, and ourselves. And the first 5 books of the Bible are also considered the teachings that come from Moses and has over 600 commandments for any Orthodox Jew to follow. Yet Matthew portrays Jesus teaching even more than what Moses did. The picture we have of Jesus today is the continuation of his teaching from the mountaintop, which began a couple of weeks ago when we heard the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. We heard about blessings, about the ripeness of life that comes when we are faced with hardships, when we are ripe to receive and to share what God has for us in the now, how God is so close to us through it all. And we also heard last Sunday about the ripeness of being salt and light and sharing the gifts that are ripe within us in each season that we face so that our world may better know the nearness of God. And today we hear Jesus mention the law that Moses taught, and it goes even further than he did. Jesus goes even further than the generally accepted laws of the community at that time. For Jesus, right living is not just about not murdering and not committing adultery or making our promises to God. Choosing life is not just about following the right rules or the right laws. And Jesus uses a lot of exaggeration, which was a common rhetorical tool at that time to make his point. So nobody please cut off any of your body members, okay? But the point is that Jesus teaches us that the way God intends for us to choose life and to be in a relationship with one another is to be internalized deep within our hearts. It's to be something that is made right within us and comes out in everything that we do. And this is in line with the teachings of the prophets Ezekiel and Jeremiah, so it isn't exactly outside what the scriptures are already telling us. Instead of relying on a court to bring justice, rely on the work of God within your hearts to make amends. Instead of relying on a court to remedy your marriage, rely on the work of God within your hearts to bring about a solution. Instead of relying on the external vows that you make to follow God's ways, rely on the work of God that is within your hearts to inspire you to make the words of your mouths be true. We cannot always rely on the human processes around us to actually bring the justice that God longs for us. Often the losers of earthly justice in Jesus' time dealt with great social consequences. Justice in the court was not always just. Judges were not always humane in their judgment, especially if they were colluding with the powers that be. Women who were divorced were left impoverished and rejected from their families and friends. And yes, only men had the power to leave their wives and win in court. And instead of relying on an external vow to keep us in check, Jesus teaches us that nobody but ourselves can really hold us accountable to serve God. A yes is a yes and a no is to be a no. If your mouth is going to say one thing, let your body say the same thing. God will not force you to do anything you will not willingly do on your own. You're either ripe and you're ready, or you aren't. And only grace can make you ripe and ready. So you don't need to pretend otherwise. God can see everything anyway. Only your heart, that place deep within you, that hears the beating of God's heart and the hearts of others, can inspire you to choose life. Only your heart, that deep place within you that hears the living word of God and has place for it to take root and to internalize God's law of love, can inspire you to choose life. Grace makes us ready to see that we have choice. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be able to know that we have the ability to choose life. In our gospel today, Jesus is teaching us to walk with greater integrity, so that our hearts are more aligned with our words and our actions. Jesus is teaching us to walk with greater responsibility, so that our hearts for one another and for God are more aligned. We cannot treat others without love and think that we have love for God. The two are always intertwined. And we can trust that grace makes us ripe and ready to see each other face to face, and know each other heart to heart, and frees us to choose to live in a way that has internalized God's law of love and honors the faces and hearts of those with whom we journey.